I think it's more about the contribution Berry made to supporting artists in Manchester. I don't think I knew him before I became a poet, or I started as a poet. I don't think I knew him on a social level. And I'm Nigerian, so, the circle is wider than the community is small, you know what I mean? Um, and we got invited, Black Scribe, to perform at Culture Week at Burley. Was it Burley then, or it was Juicy Burley? And this mountain of a man who flirted and encouraged and supported was the essence of that thing. And I remember thinking, this is amazing, that an individual, which not an individual, obviously Mrs. Edwards is supporting him and the family, but an individual thought to put this together and gave the opportunity as a writer, myself and the other members of Black Scribe, individually as a collection, to share what we thought were our words of wisdom at that time with an audience in a celebration of coming together, more than even the culture being from Jamaica or Nigeria or whatever, the coming together collectively. And my memories of him is walking around like a king, walking around the room and the audiences, and he used to heckle me, because at the time I used to kind of do these kind of sexy, what I thought were sexy little pieces, and he'd heckle and shout encouragement in those heckling at times that weren't always appropriate. But he was the, what's the word I'm looking for, the essence of what was happening in this huge presence, never mind physical, but the huge presence of what he was. Yeah, he was Culture Week. That's what I knew. You almost got an instruction. It was Culture Week coming up. I expect to see you there, and you turned up. And I don't want to put him in the role of headmaster, but you turned up because he was like the head of the village. You turned up. It was a ritual that you observed, and you went to, yeah. And likewise, when he did Black History Month, it was the same thing. I have to say I know little about how he organised it. What I know is that Mr. Edwards brought in speakers that obviously weren't part of my education, weren't part of my social circle, my intellectual circle, and opened those doors of knowledge. That's what I know, that he did that. So much so that when he kind of went into half retirement, because he never really retired, I took up the mantle for Black History Month with Mr. Edwards as one of our patrons for that. It was important, and that first catalogue said we are carrying the mantle for Mr. Edwards because he was that important in there. But the process of his work, no, I wasn't involved in that. I was more gifted by what he did. I received the gift of what he did as an individual and as a community member, I suppose, really. And I was very honoured when they planted the tree of remembrance at All Saints, that he allowed me to present him with that nomination at that time. He was kind of said, call her up. He was always... Mr. Edwards was always like a papa. I won't call him father, that's wrong. He was like a papa. The hug, the love, and the support was always there, constant. The legacy he leaves is dependent on us as our generation. It's dependent on us keeping him alive, as in this memorial we're doing now. If we don't keep it alive, then his legacy will be wasted. So the role and the burden of doing that is on our shoulders, because we're in a time where people forget. They can't remember what they did last week. People forget and don't invest in what happened yesterday to build on tomorrow. So that's the legacy. We're his foot soldiers, so to speak. We have to keep him alive and keep him in the conversation, and we do, amazingly so. We do that. When I hosted the Pan-African anniversary for the City Council, one of the things I wanted to do was honour Mr. and Mrs. Edwards, because it is a couple. To say to people, what happened in 1945 was kept alive by this man and others, but in this occasion, it was to honour both them as a couple, individuals and a couple, which is what they managed to be, always, together, but it wasn't the little wife following the husband, it wasn't a nagged husband, it's Mr. and Mrs. Edwards, and I think that's important as well. Referring to him as Berry is one thing, but in his presence, it's always Mr. Edwards. Always. He held that title. Very much so. And I've heard it being used in a disparaging way at city council meetings, where he stood in his corner, stood his ground, made sure his voice was heard. And the people on the attack didn't realise that everything they said that was negative, we held on to that and we remembered that, because any attack on him was an attack on us. I know that he was the one that kind of brought it together, which is to say when we started Acts of Achievement, we made sure that people were aware we were carrying that flag that he raised in the first place. And that, when I started to do Acts of Achievement, I had to tell people I'm not doing comedy nights. I'm not doing nights on women's hair. It has to be educational, entertaining, educational, which is what he started off to be. We weren't doing Black History, put anything on the stage, anything in the gallery, anything. You had to learn something from it. And that was very much his mantra. And I tried to keep that going during the years I ran Acts of Achievement. And if I pick it up again, it will be there then. I knew about the Saturday School. I suppose I haven't got children, so, my involvement on that is it's non-existent. But I did go in and do some sessions as an artist. What I remember about him is actually him being very cheeky. That's what I remember about him. When I think of him, I don't think of him being stern or being this kind of, community head. I think of a cheeky man who knew what he was doing and knew how to work the system. And his one aim was us, to use it in a northern manner, us collectively, each individual and as a unit of one, whether we're from the Caribbean, from Africa, from Asia. That's what he was up to. So that twinkle in his eye always hid an agenda that was purposeful and had meaning to it. That's what I remember him by.